Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to tonight's live stream, looking back at Thomas Tuchel's first year in charge of Chelsea Football Club and what a year it's been. But before we get into that, please make sure you smash a like on this video and please do subscribe to the channel. We're looking to hit 300 subscribers by the end of the month. We've got a few days left. We need 18 more subscribers. So if you're watching live, you're not subscribed, please click that subscribe button. If you're watching it back, and you haven't subscribed, then please click the subscribe button. We're still hoping to hit that 300 mark by the end of the month. So every little helps. So please do help us out. But yeah, as I said, I mean, it's been a bit of a nostalgic week for Chelsea fans. Obviously, no fixtures going on at the moment. We're not in action until February 5th in the FA Cup. But we had this week already a year since Frank Lampard was sacked. I think that was perhaps on Tuesday. Thomas Tuchel's appointment yesterday, a year ago yesterday, and we also had former manager Jose Mourinho's birthday all in the same week. Before we get into Thomas Tuchel's achievements in his first year, George, obviously a year ago, cast our minds back, everything started so well. Similar to this season, really. We were top of the league in December. Frank was doing a great job. And then the wheels fell off. We went on a horrid run. We knew how it was going to end. We're not going to get into that, but I think the board lost the respect and perhaps the faith of a lot of people with the sacking of Frank Lampard, didn't they?
Yeah, me included. I think I'd lost a bit of faith in Chelsea for the first time in a long time, and I've been upset as a Chelsea fan before, as we all have, with Mourinho, coming back and being sacked when we still think some of the sackings in previous years have been unfair. Ancelotti comes to mind after winning the double. So, yeah, I think Chelsea fans got a bit carried away, myself included, about this was perhaps a change of course where Chelsea were going to continue with a manager over that 3.5-year gap that we still haven't seen us go over. I think Jose Mourinho is still the longest standing manager since the Abramovich era. So, yeah, they did lose a bit of faith. And I think the one credit I'll give to Chelsea Football Club, looking back at it, is that they did act fairly quickly, and we didn't go for an interim, and we went for another head coach, and thank God we did. But it's weird how all these things link together. I mean, Mourinho's birthday, and obviously something as bad as Frank Lampard, who we've all got an incredible amount of respect for what he did for Chelsea Football Club, and then Tuchel coming in, yeah, I mean, the rest is history, which I'm sure you'll get into. But yeah, I have to say, as a Chelsea fan, I was on the edge, and I needed a lot of convincing after they did that, because I thought it was quite brutal.
Yeah, I think yes, it was brutal, but I think it's perhaps brutal in terms of the fact that he was such a legend as a player and what he's done for the club. In terms of actually the run he'd been on himself, like, I don't think he can really have any questions about getting the boot. We've seen much better managers than Frank Lampard get the sack for the same or less. So it was the writing on the wall. But, I think we all thought that perhaps this would be different. I do think, though, I'm not going to go on for a tangent, but I do think that if we are going to actually look at challenging for league titles, which is what we really want to do on a consistent basis, we might have to switch this model up of constantly switching managers. You look now at the blueprint of like Manchester City with Pep being there for multiple years, and you've had the likes of, Klopp's been there multiple years as well. I think it really does make a difference, particularly when consistency league-wise, cup-wise, I'm not sure it makes too much difference, as we've demonstrated. But I mean, George, obviously Frank is moved on, and Thomas Tuchel was appointed pretty swiftly in that same week, only really a few days later. It's been blatantly obvious they've been speaking to him beforehand. We know how these things work. But Tuchel himself, treated quite brutally by PSG. He was sacked on Christmas Eve Christmas Eve 2020. So that was a nice Christmas present from PSG to him. You briefly touched on the interim. There wasn't a lot of names linked with the job, at the time. Quite hard to get managers out of work mid-season, even if you're the club the size of Chelsea. So going for Tuchel, he seemed really the only kind of obvious candidate of a high caliber that, would be easy to do. Before I get your thoughts on his appointment, are you glad that Ralph Rangnick turned us down? Because we did offer him we offered him the interim until the end of the season from that January, but he turned it down because there was like no consultancy role at the end or anything like that. I mean, I know hindsight's a great thing, but I think that's turned out to be a real plus that didn't happen.
Oh God, absolute blessing. I mean, honestly, I am not convinced by Manchester United and Ralph Rangnick at all. I don't get the noise that's coming out. I mean, I may be a bit blindsided because I don't know much of his history in terms of, he's been called the Messiah of football and the most intelligent man in football. And I know some of the highest, regarding managers only have high praises for him, but I still think Manchester United are getting away with it as they have been for a couple of years, with just, the quality players that they have, getting them out of trouble now and again. I still don't see any quality there. So, I mean, from a Chelsea perspective, and obviously what we went on to do, I think it was an absolute blessing that Ralph Rangnick was not appointed and that we had someone who certainly more experienced in terms of being in the dugout week in, week out is a huge benefit. But I'm glad that it didn't go down that route.
I mean, obviously, Tuchel, well-respected manager, had done good things in the game. Obviously, started out at Mainz in Germany, went to Borussia Dortmund, followed a similar path to Jurgen Klopp, having both managed Mainz and Dortmund. At Dortmund, his team played good football, ran Bayern Munich close in the Bundesliga, did win the German Cup there, and then he gets a move to PSG, where obviously, I've got to be honest, that's a really tough place to manage, not in terms of like winning the French league, but in terms of the external pressure from the board to win the Champions League. That is literally what you're brought in to do there. And managing the likes of Neymar, Mbappe, Di Maria. I think it's quite a hard dressing room to keep together, really. And, obviously he won the French Cups, the French League, and he did get them to their first ever Champions League final. And against a very good Bayern Munich side, they narrowly lost 1-0. But I have to say, watching that final, that he was actually, they were the better side and they were unlucky to lose that game. But yeah, I mean, George, what were your thoughts on Thomas Tuchel? Did you know much about him before he arrived?
I have to say I don't know much about his backstory. That's obviously grown as he's affiliated with Chelsea and I've started to read around the subject. But I have to say I didn't know a lot about him, and I'm a bit of a fan that I think I disrespect the PSG job. I feel this is a bit of a cop out. I don't, my feelings towards PSG, and I always question managers who go there for that reason. I think I think that obviously the main attraction is they want to be the first. They want to be the first to do the major thing with PSG. And to be fair to Thomas Tuchel, he was, I think they lost. Did they lose 1-0? I think
he's got the closest out of anyone.
So, and like you said, rightly so, with those personalities that they have in that dressing room who pretty much run that club. I mean, Neymar, Di Maria, the like. I think now looking at his story, you have to give him a lot of credit for keeping those players grounded and ultimately getting the best out of them. And ever since, they haven't reached those levels as a club before he arrived and since he left. So at the time, I was a bit like, Chelsea have nowhere to go. Where's the direction going? Another quiet manager who's not really in the headlines, not really regarded as one of the, I'm not going to say he's not an elite manager, but not one that's always talked about, but maybe for good reason. And I think Chelsea ultimately went down the right route of not having someone who's always in the headlines making noise that we've gone for previously. But yeah, like you said, it was in brutal circumstances, wasn't it? I mean, they were definitely speaking to him before. I remember on Chelsea TV him walking down, going for an outdoor training session. Already his jacket was made, so there was no doubt that they had all of his kit ready to go when Frank Lampard was still being told that he was out the door. But yeah.
I mean, George, obviously Thomas Tuchel arrives. It's a whirlwind kind of 24 to 48 hours. He literally arrives. I think he has one training session in the evening, and then it's straight into that game against Wolves the following day. So really very, very little time to prepare. Obviously, I think he would have known a couple of weeks in advance that he was potentially going to have a high chance of getting a job, time to do a bit of research. I know he said in interviews that he had been following Chelsea for a while, etc. Obviously, I know that's different to actually being in the hot seat. Lampard, though, obviously the team did have its flaws. Going forward, we did score a lot of goals. The big issue was defensively. We were letting in so many goals, and it was goals every single game, and it seemed a lot of individual errors as well. So Thomas Tuchel's first port of call really was to tie that defence up. And we saw that game against Wolves. I think, we all thought, I wonder what Tuchel's going to do. And they ended up going with a 3 at the back. We had Callum Hudson-Odoi at wing back. What were your thoughts, George, of that first game? I know it ended up being a ball 0-0 draw. What were your thoughts on seeing the 5 at the back again and the kind of the tactics that Tuchel deployed in that game?
Do you know what? I was actually really, really pleased with the performance. I think if you look at the circumstances of losing a manager, and regardless of his results, the players would have had a tight bond with Frank Lampard. A lot of those players within the dressing room would have looked up to him as young kids. So it's always a bit difficult. A new manager has come in, no time to really put his stance on, and the impact that he had in terms of the performance. I know we didn't win the game, but like you said, the amount of goals we were leaking and silly mistakes, it was a very solid performance. We dominated possession. Pretty much were very, very tight at the back with a change of formation as well. And I remember him saying in the press conference that he wanted to rely on his senior players in the squad. And I think that was a really good touch, considering that Frank Lampard was actually trying to go the other way and develop the youth, and probably didn't get the balance right of managing those experienced players, which probably would have given him better results in defensive areas, certainly. So even though we didn't win the game, the impact that he had in that 90 minutes after only a day in training, I thought was pretty exceptional, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously coming in, George, I guess the main objective, first port of call, was to tighten up defensively. I think it was the obvious thing. I don't think he could come in and carry on playing as we were. But have you been surprised, particularly in that first 6 months and the subsequent 6 months as well, really, at just how he's managed to transform that defence? As we've touched on, under Lampard, we're letting in so many goals. We just knew we weren't keeping clean sheets at all. To sort of overnight just be keeping clean sheets all over the place, left, right, and centre. Players that had not been playing well at all suddenly looking like the top class defenders they were. I mean, it's a quite remarkable transformation. I mean, I can't remember seeing a lot of things similar to it with a manager coming in and having that much of an impact in the defensive area of the pitch. It's quite remarkable.
No, and we've seen it going forward, because every manager that we bring in, I mean, I remember even when Scolari came in, we won the game, first game of the season against Portsmouth. I think we won like 4-0, Deco scoring from outside the box. Everyone thought, we've brought Brazilian football to the Premier League. And you do naturally get that bounce where players now suddenly have to play for their position. You've got a new manager, a new man to impress. But it's much harder doing it in those defensive areas, because those situations wouldn't have had time to be worked on in the training ground, and there's still going to be that element of doubt. But yeah, I just think he got the right balance by not, by giving the experienced players that opportunity, but also realizing the great work that Frank Lampard had done, and not completely just coming in, throwing everything that Frank Lampard did out the window and saying this is my way or the highway, which a lot of managers can do. Which I think got a lot of people on his side very, very quickly, which is why I think the results that you're about to discuss now kind of show that.
I mean, I don't think any of us would have thought, George, that from, Thomas Tuchel coming in, what we were like defensively under Frank, that from the 27th of December 2020, I think that's going to be, we've kept 36 clean sheets, the most out of any team in the top 5 European leagues in all competitions. 8 clear of Sevilla, 9 ahead of City, 10 ahead of Liverpool. I mean, the transformation is remarkable. I mean, like how much of that is also down to bringing key senior players back in? Antonio Rudiger was all but out of the club. Lampard wasn't playing him. Tottenham wanted him. PSG wanted him. I think Rudiger would have been on his way in the January window had Lampard stayed. I mean, what a great piece of management or coaching, whatever you want to call it, to get Rudiger back into the team. And now look at him. He's been one of the best centre-backs in the world, really, since Thomas Tuchel's come back. How important are decisions like that from the manager?
I think that comes down to experience. Unfortunately for Frank, I think he got a bit carried away with wanting to do something new and something different to formulate his identity as a manager. And a lot of people make erratic decisions when they do that. And I was surprised because I felt like Frank Lampard, having been involved as a player so many times where that spine of experienced players was so important, that he didn't recognise that in his own team of just the quality he had. And that comes with experience. Tuchel, he's dealt with big name players. He's been a manager for a lot longer a time, and he can get the balance between putting arms around shoulders of players like you've mentioned, Rudiger, and saying that you're still an important part of the squad. And like I said, you do naturally get that boost. I also read today, mate, that in the same amount of games as we're talking today, that he's actually got a better defensive record than what Mourinho had as Chelsea manager, which is astounding, really, if you think of, the league title we won in 04-05. We just, I think it was 15 goals conceded or something
whole
like that.
Season.
And I know Jose Mourinho at the moment, his win percentage, I think, was slightly higher, but there's not much in it. There really isn't. So we are seeing something very, very special if you compare someone who we still think is the greatest manager to ever be involved at Chelsea Football Club, just how close, if not better, some of the numbers are for Thomas Tuchel.
Yeah, it has been quite remarkable. I mean, the first year in charge has really been quite something. I was just going to bring the stats up now of his first year. The first Chelsea manager to reach FA Cup, League Cup, and Champions League finals ever. No other Chelsea manager's done that. That's quite something. These are the other stats here. So 66 games managed, 39 wins, 18 draws, 9 defeats, 110 goals scored, 42 conceded, UEFA and FIFA Coach of the Year, Champions League, and a Super Cup. I mean, talking about impact, I don't think anyone could have had a better impact than what he's had. I mean, what's impressed you most about him? Because for me, he just comes across as a really intelligent guy. Obviously, a fantastic manager, fantastic man manager. We've seen it with the likes of Kepa, how he's, breathed new life into him. How he brings senior players back into the squad, how he gets reactions out of players. He obviously rates Callum Hudson-Odoi very highly. We saw him sub him on against Southampton, then take him off. That could have easily been the end for the player and manager there, but he's dealt with that so well. How he's dealt with the Lukaku interview. He's like in the media. He's very honest. I mean, the list goes on. What impresses you most if you can pick one thing about Thomas Tuchel?
I would say character. I say it's how he holds himself in all those aspects. Always, like you said, speaking honest in press conferences. Always trying to say the right things, but he says it because he believes in it, not because that's what fans and the media want to hear. Just a very calm presence, but at the same, I think what impresses me most is his idea of not almost ambition, I think is the word, in the fact that he demands so much from his players. And you can see that how animated he is. And despite the situation that Chelsea were in at that point, he still really did. I don't think he believed at the start, kind of similar to Di Matteo, that we were going to go and win the Champions League.
No
but it was more about, we're still in this competition and we should be ambitious as Chelsea Football Club to go and reach for the very top still, even though we're in a very treacherous position. And I think that's the demand he had on his players, and he still does, is quite remarkable, because he always picks out the little details. And I just think his honesty and his charisma are the things that stand out to me. Just a really well-rounded person who's obviously a very intelligent coach, but also that ambition when we were in a poor position when he took over was ultimately what turned it around.
I mean, we were lucky enough to speak to Eddie Newton a few months back on the podcast, and he was saying a similar thing, that when obviously him and Di Matteo went in, the senior players were so important to them. Obviously, they're far less experienced in management than Thomas Tuchel is, but he went and did exactly the same thing, calling on the senior players. How important a move is that, George, when you're coming into a club, difficult circumstances, a club legend has just been sacked, a lot of senior players kind of been frozen out. How important a move was that then to, come in, get those guys back on side and formulate them as kind of a big part of the plans? Because another one who was integral and had a fantastic, last season, Jorginho. didn't feature at all on the Lampard. He was virtually on the verge of leaving as well. Him and Rudiger were the two main ones. And for Tuchel to come in, I know it sounds easy, come in, it's important to rely on your senior pros, build around them, etc. But it's a lot easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, and we'll never know the impact that they had off the pitch because we're not in their private circles. But you could see from some of the footage, particularly when we got to the kind of quarterfinals, semi-finals. I remember there was a bit in the stands where I think we scored a goal. Yeah. It might have been against Atletico, and Thiago Silva and Jorginho were hugging each other. They weren't featured, jumping up and down. That was like quarterfinal stage. And you saw in the final them all on the touchline with minutes to go, just really still being the aggressive, vocal presence on the touchline as players. And it's not as easy as people say it is, because I think we've also had very experienced coaches like Rafa Benitez who tried to go the other way and almost draft out Lampard and Terry and not play them and go a different route, and they couldn't get the best out of them. And they were the top professionals and still at the very best in their game at that point. You only have to look at when Mourinho took over, when he went back, at how well John Terry played in that season when we won the league title and he was back to his best. So he knows that those players had it in the locket. It was just unlocking that inner belief again in those players that they could be a central part of something very special at the club. And we still had things to fight for. And again, it all comes down to experience.
Yeah, I think that's a massive, massive part of it, is the experience, the know-how, having been there and done it in difficult dressing rooms, and playing up against big teams as well. But, before we move on to the Champions League campaign, George, ultimately the league form, when he come in January, we were sitting in languishing down in ninth place. I don't think either of us thought that we could potentially get the top four. I mean, ultimately it didn't matter, but we weren't to know that. And, we only just scraped fourth place by virtue of actually Tottenham, of all people, doing us a favour by beating Leicester on the last day, because we lost to Villa. So, if we hadn't won that game, we might have missed out. But I mean, how important was that to secure that top four, given how bad it was? I mean, we might not have been able to attract certain players in the summer if we hadn't secured that top four position.
It's imperative for a club of our size, with the transfers that we go for. And we know what Roman Abramovich is like. He loves the Champions League. So to not get top four, regardless of the situation we're in, it was the objective. And we had a lot of work to do, but it's not just that season. It impacts the rest of Thomas Tuchel's reign at Chelsea, doesn't it? Like we said, you wouldn't be able to attract the likes of Lukaku in the season after if we don't reach Champions League.
This season,
you can't attract the best players.
Yeah. This season, we were playing Europa League football this season, if that was the case.
Yeah.
Or potentially,
There aren't many clubs or managers. Well, I don't think there has been a manager who's come in and done an impact like that ever. If you look at the league position and where he finished on top of getting to two finals and one of the biggest and winning it's can you name another manager who's come in halfway through the season and done that? I know Di Matteo did, but it's unbelievable. We've got to count our lucky stars, because the amount of, at the moment, Chelsea in a bit of a predicament at the moment, but careful what you wish for, because if Tuchel gets sacked, I think what
no, I mean, we definitely don't want to think about that. But I mean, Champions League, George, let's move on to it.
Please.
Ultimately, we ended up winning. We obviously ended up winning. Great night in Porto. The least goals conceded in Champions League history in a run to winning the trophy. I think it was 4 in total, 4 or 5.
Unbelievable.
Which is unbelievable. But having said that, George, having struggled in the league for much of that season, Champions League, unbeaten in the group stage. I think we won every game bar the last one at home to Krasnodar, which is a dead rubber because we'd already qualified. And then it wasn't the fact that, we were struggling in the league, and then you think, we've got Atletico Madrid, they were flying high in Spain at the time. In every single knockout match for that Champions League tournament, we outplayed every single team over both legs. We outplayed Atletico Madrid over both legs. We outplayed Porto over both legs. We outplayed Real Madrid over both legs, and we outplayed Man City in the final. I mean, I can't put my finger on it because I wasn't expecting that at all. I just don't know how we managed that. But as we've said on the show before, if we were going to win big trophies, it wasn't going to be because we're going to outscore teams. It was going to be built from the back. And that's exactly what it was.
Still can't quite believe it. It's almost a bit of a haze because I think some of the shine was taken off it because not everyone could attend, and certainly in the knockout stages building up to the final, there were no people in attendance. So it was almost like a bit of a blur. You were watching it in lockdown, and you could only really get involved by watching it on your phones and chatting to your mates afterwards. And all of a sudden, we were in the final, and it was just, I don't know. I mean, I went out on the King's Road afterwards, outside the bridge, and it was just a bit of, considering, you know, we've only been in 3 finals. You know, one of which we'd lost, one of which we'd won, and been so long since the last final. And all of a sudden, it almost was a carbon copy of 2012. I know 2012 had more epic moments in terms of the matches itself, but like you rolled off there, I mean, least amount of goals conceded, and you're talking about playing the best sides in Europe, in the world, around Europe. Incredible. And every match we were the underdogs. You know, no hope. We're supposed to get battered. Everyone was waiting for that one poor night where we just didn't turn up. And just the most incredible journey, and we'll never forget it.
No, definitely won't. I agree with that. It just feels odd, you know. I wouldn't have expected it at all. And the fact we were I'm not saying we convincingly won it, but the fact we didn't really look like losing any of those Champions League games. I know we lost the Porto one with an overhead kick in stoppage time, but in terms of the ties, I just never went into any of those ties thinking, I don't fancy us here. I don't know what it was about it. It was just something, I don't know, just something special, as you say. And, you know, to come in after 6 months and win a Champions League where the team's struggling down in 9th in the league, not playing good football, struggling to bed big money signings in, to get a transformation like that is... I'm not sure it's happened anywhere in world football. I'm not sure if we'll see anything like that again certainly for a long, long time.
You know, and it was huge for him as well, because don't forget he'd lost the final in the previous year, as did Thiago Silva. You know, and for them personally, it's hugely important. But he also, again, spoke so well. You know, gave a lot of credit to Frank Lampard for some of the players that performed on that night, and said that those were embedded through him. You know, and we weren't the favourites. And, you know, people can say, well, the draw opened up for us. We weren't really playing the best Real Madrid, or
still got to beat them.
Still got to beat them. And we'd never faced Real Madrid in a European competition for a long time. I think that was the first time they'd come to Stamford Bridge for ever, maybe in Champions League.
Yeah.
And then we had to beat the best team in the world currently, Man City, kept a clean sheet. And they knocked on the door many times, but that just shows the credit that Thomas Tuchel knew we weren't the best side in Europe, and the best side in Europe doesn't always win the Champions League. But that just shows the impact he had on that team to believe that we could beat these teams, and we won it. And that is the difference. And we all know as Chelsea fans, even me, who's a huge Frank Lampard admirer, we're not getting anywhere near that if Frank Lampard's in charge. We know.
No, we're not at all. And I think that ultimately vindicates that it was the right decision to make.
Yeah.
It 100% was. It really was. But I mean, kind of moving away from the Champions League win, George. I mean, in his time so far, Tuchel's obviously beaten Pep Guardiola in his first 3 matches against him all in a row. Beaten Klopp, Conte, Zidane, Simeone, Mourinho, Allegri, Ancelotti. It's what a group of managers that is. And the only one of those managers that has actually beaten him has been Pep, obviously just in the league match gone by. So, I mean, it's quite some record against those big managers also. But also another thing that's important, and we've seen with previous Chelsea managers, Tuchel seems to have the ability to manage up really well in terms of managing up to those above him, so the likes of Marina, Petr Cech, ultimately Roman Abramovich, maybe Bruce Buck, the chairman as well. That's going to be really important in terms of how long his tenure at the club's going to be, isn't it?
Well, Chelsea formula-wise, I mean, we say if it was a chemical formula, it works. Chelsea seem to just appoint someone for the short term, get the trophies in the bag, and then when things start to go sour, it dissipates. And we're coming towards that now, where results haven't started to go our way. That my only concern is he has fallen out with teams above before. We've seen it at Borussia Dortmund.
There's more at
PSG,
PSG.
like you said.
It's hard at PSG to manage
ended very
up. It
sour,
really
but
is, yeah.
Yeah. But I think for the character he is, I think that's why it complements so well. He's probably not knocking on Roman Abramovich's door, demanding for players.
Well, certainly not in public.
No, and he doesn't
No.
slam his players like Mourinho would do and throw them under the bus, which works when you're winning. But when you're not performing, Mourinho sometimes did come out and shot himself in the foot a lot of the time. Remember this massive scene with the doctor. I mean, that didn't help.
Yeah, that was poor.
So Tuchel's a very well-rounded, calm individual. And despite having the fire in his belly to want to win things and probably demand things from above, I think, again, he seems to strike, or appears to strike, that perfect balance between getting everyone on side just at the right level. And again, that's just credit to Thomas Tuchel and what he's achieved in the years, and hopefully many years to come.
I mean, he's managed to kind of do that with a mix of with a squad of players that is a kind of a mix and match. And essentially, he's kind of inherited players that Mourinho had, Conte had, Sarri had, and Lampard had. So this isn't even his own squad. He's had one window to bring in what he wants. And we brought in Lukaku, and that was about it, really. So Tuchel hasn't really had the opportunity to bring in the players that he wants to bring in. So to do it with a mix match, with a pick and mix of players from those previous managers, and to make it work is even more credit to the job he's doing. I mean, George, we'll touch on. I mean, there's been a lot of high points. I guess the one low point in his reign so far, apart from the run in December going into January, which put us out of contention for the league, would have been that FA Cup final defeat. And that's, I guess, is the only kind of blot on the copybook as such. I mean, looking back now, I know we won the Champions League, but that one's still a bit disappointing considering we've now lost. We have obviously lost back-to-back finals now.
Yeah, that's the one that sticks out for me, the FA Cup final, because I thought that would have just been the perfect end to what was a fantastic end of season run.
Yeah.
For some really weird reason, I wasn't that disappointed, just because I almost had a soft spot for Leicester, and I don't know why. Just because of the occasion and the fact that Brendan Rod and there's a great documentary out if you haven't seen it about the owner and the tragedy of that, and that it's great for them to win an FA Cup, but that would have capped it off. We were within a millimetre of getting that equaliser that probably would have turned the game. Wasn't to be. Other ones stick out, like this season where we lost at home at the Bridge to City, weren't really in the game. That did affect the kind of shift in who was bossing this title race. At the time, it was a bit of a knock. But we've had some great nights as well. I mean, the Super Cup was one that sticks out to me in terms of a positive, because Chelsea in previous years have not turned up for that match, taking it for granted. Falcao ripping us apart, some other teams losing on penalties to Liverpool. So I think if there was one bad match, that would probably be that one. But I think we actually played pretty well. We lost by a great individual goal, and we were unlucky with a VAR.
And I suppose in terms of the worst Premier League match, that would be that 5-2 implosion at home to West Brom at Stamford Bridge, where we had I think Thiago Silva was sent off, and I don't know what happened there. It all just fell apart. But I mean, it's just those two games that kind of stick out as I thought
the Villa game on the last day of the season was poor as well.
But there's not, we're kind of nitpicking it. There's not been a lot wrong at all in this first year. I mean, as we said, Champions League, Super Cup, obviously made the FA Cup final. We're in a League Cup final now. We're still in the FA Cup, still in the Champions League, with the Club World Cup to come as well. There's lots to add. But I mean, just to round out, George, going forward, as well as Tuchel's done so far, there's going to be a lot of challenges ahead. Getting something out of Romelu Lukaku. I guess another one is to kind of, obviously he's made us so effective defensively. It's now applying that to the other end of the pitch. And I guess also that fallout, managing the fallout from whatever happens with Rudiger, Christensen, Aspilicueta going forward. They'll need to be replaced. I don't know who's going to end up staying there, keeping hold of talented young players and integrating them, so the likes of potentially Billy Gilmore, Conor Gallagher, Brozier, those guys on loan at Southampton and Palace doing well. There's quite a few things coming up if he's still here, which we all hope he is, that need to be addressed. You've got the likes of N'Golo Kante and Jorginho both out of contracts in 2023. Need to get rid of deadwood. And ultimately, it's all going to come down to bringing that Premier League title to Stamford Bridge. So as well as he's done in his first year, as I've just reeled off, there's quite a few things that still need to be dealt with. And I think the squad is going to change quite a lot over the next year or so. I think this summer particularly is massive.
I echo exactly what you said. I think this will determine the outcome of whether Chelsea break the mould and go again with Thomas Tuchel, or whether we do the classic formula that seems to work, which is get rid of managers and bring in another cup success. That the idea that you brought on the top of the show is, can a club really challenge for the league title now in modern day football without that consistency of management? And at the moment, the evidence shows that it's a no, which again is a stumbling block and a big question mark for a club the size of Chelsea and what we have achieved under the different managers, that we haven't really put together a kind of a title race for 5 or 6 years. So there's some huge decisions to be made, huge chapters. Like you said, there's going to be some fans that are going to be upset with the decisions that Tuchel has to make, whether that's getting rid of someone, I don't know, for an example, like a Kante. Someone's going to have to make that decision eventually and say that actually we need to move forwards. There's also, like you said, the Lukaku situation. Do you stick or twist? And you've just spent a lot of money on a player like that. That's going to determine an outcome of a manager, because if he gets it wrong, he's in trouble. I just hope, like all Chelsea fans, I think we trust Thomas Tuchel, and like we're celebrating his year in charge tonight, I think we need to embrace the fact that the decisions he's made so far have been spot on. So why not trust him with the decisions going forward? It's just a question of that. Who's making the decisions? Are the people above still determining who's coming in and out the door? And are Chelsea finally going to break the mold of giving Tuchel more than a couple of seasons in charge before we change ship? And I really hope the answer to that is yes. But it's a results-based business, and we've got to put a league type chase together next season for sure with the squad we had.
Yeah, no, 100% agree, mate. I really do. I mean, it's been a fantastic first year in charge of Thomas Tuchel. There's going to be plenty more ups, hopefully, starting with the Club World Cup. There's going to be a few downs. There always are at Chelsea. There's going to be some difficult decisions that need to be made, with key players being moved on, shipping on deadwood, how best to integrate the plethora of talented academy stars we've got coming through and the ones out on loan. There's still some big work for Thomas Tuchel to do in that inbox, but I mean, it's been a fantastic year in charge, and hopefully this season we can still end up with a few trophies. But I do think we have got a manager that we can keep for 5-6 seasons if
we've said it before,
if the board back him, and if Chelsea are going to change and keep someone for multiple seasons, this is the guy to do it with. We have to do it with this guy. Otherwise, I don't know what we're going to do. We can't just keep going through managers, because, as we've touched on, you end up with managers getting a squad that has been put together by 3 other managers. You've got no chance to get your own players in, because you bring your own players in, and then before you know it, you've been moved on again. And then you end up with players that are brought in by another manager. The new manager doesn't really fancy them. You can't get rid of them. And it just goes in a cycle. And we've seen that. So it's a message to the Chelsea board. Just please back this guy. The fan base all love him. Everyone's behind him. Just give him the time, give him the money, give him the players, give him what he wants, and he'll give you what he wants. We all love Thomas Tuchel, so it's been a great first year in charge, and let's just hope that there's plenty more years to come. But being Chelsea fans, there's never a dull day. Could be out the door next week. So we just have to enjoy it whilst we can. But yeah, Thomas Tuchel, a fantastic impact so far. That seems like a good point to round out on. George, thanks for your time as always, mate. Always a pleasure to talk all things Chelsea. Guys, please do, as I said at the top of the video, smash a like on this video. Please do subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you're watching this, please click that button. We appreciate all the support. And if you're watching back, do exactly the same thing. We need to hit that 300 by the end of the month. We need a big push now, 18 to go. So really help us out. We've got a few days left to do it. Plenty of exciting stuff coming on the channel. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in live, guys. And if you're watching it back, thank you for watching it. And yeah, we will catch you again soon. No Chelsea action for a while. There'll be a Chelsea news video coming in the next few days, so stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for your time tonight, guys, and we'll catch you soon. Cheers.